Yes. So the exhibition is called Now is the Time, and I thought that was an appropriate title, seeing as the work for this exhibition is really in response to what's going on in the world right now, like politically, environmentally, socially, and just an exploration of those. So the themes that run through my work are structures of power, inequitable systems, and invisible labour. And so I'm touching on each of these aspects in a number of the works. Well, all of the works kind of pick on one or two of these aspects through their inspiration and their making. So the work that I showed with She Bends Here previously, with the VHS tape and the surveillance mirrors and the big sequined and neon piece that said enough, there's definitely strong themes that lead from that into this work. The material language is different, but actually, particularly with the VHS tape, we're still talking very strongly about power and kind of inaccessibility. So thinking about data as a form of control, and like who gets access to information and who gets denied. And quite frequently that is to do with social economic structure, it's to do with capitalism and consumerism, it's about designed obsolescence. And so if you go into any like charity shop or thrift store, there are stacks and stacks and stacks of VHS tapes, but none of us have the equipment to be able to access that anymore. And so the VHS tape was definitely following along that stream and kind of really starting my investigation into these kind of systems that exclude specific demographics of people. So the resources that were available to me during the COLA residency are very specific to what happens at COLA and the manufacture. And my usual approach to materials is that I think everything has a conceptual weight and an energy to it. And so like fake fur will never be the same as real fur because they talk about two very different things. And so that's usually my approach. And so the VHS tape was brought in specifically because black mylar could have done the job visually, but actually it was really important to me that it was something that was discarded, something that was readily available, but also something that had information that couldn't be accessed. And I was also very specific about the movies that I chose to be in that piece and be in those pieces. But with COLA on the exhibition, this feels like archival material, which is very different to the work that I usually make. And I was really interested initially because of the tension and the contrast between neon, which is kind of my chosen light medium, and the clay, because they both speak about fire, but with the ceramics, the fire is in the processing and making the plastic material permanent. But with neon, you use the fire to shape the neon. And then also, it isn't technically fire that's happening in the tubes, but there's something that feels like fire. And so I was really interested in the visual tension that could happen there. And so initially, my proposal was that I take a portable neon setup to the residency, and then I work with the ceramic and the neon in conjunction to develop work and just see how the two materials responded to each other. I very quickly realized that it was kind of wasting my potential time in the pottery. And so put the neon on hold, although I had a colleague that brought me some pumped tubes that I could work with. And really the work that came out of COLA was responding to being in the factory, seeing mostly men, with how much physical labor it took to make urinals and sinks and toilets. Because we don't think, when we're sitting on the toilet, we don't think of the number of human beings who have actually come into contact with that object before we have. And that really kind of appealed to the line of thinking with the invisible labour. So when I first got to Cola for the residency, they offered up a variety of molds that we could start casting with, but also we were very much encouraged to make our own molds. And I had gone with an idea, and my idea was to work with the tube support. So a tube support is very essential in neon making. It is the invisible thing that holds everything together, and it holds everything on the wall or in place, designed to be invisible. And so it was literally a one-liner. I walked into the residency going, what would a tube support look like if it could be anything that it wanted? And so I was really looking about making it more flamboyant and scaling it up and just kind of trying to make the tube support the feature. My initial ideas failed spectacularly over and over and over again. And there was definitely a period of 2 or 3 weeks where every single thing I touched fell apart, failed, just didn't work. And actually, people don't really talk about that. People don't talk about how much of trying something new and pushing the limits of what you're doing is failure, and how much it is having to just show up and keep showing up. Feeling a little, not crestfallen, but kind of trying not to kind of lose my momentum. I was literally just grabbing things. So the pieces that are in the raising, the kind of cone shapes, I found 2 pieces of wood in the studio and I stuck it together and I made a mold. There was some plumbing pipe, I made a mold. I went to a thrift store and I found a lampstand that looked like an antique candle holder. I made a mold. So I just made random molds, cast all of these pieces individually, and then just started cutting them up and putting them together to see where it went. And this is really the first time since I was at undergrad that I've actually done that process of exploration through making, and literally just following my nose, see what works, see what doesn't work. And then I started to develop what eventually became the neon piece over here. So I'm really interested in the idea of individual objects that are physically unstable being brought together with other unstable objects to create something that is stable. And so that is really the drive that led for this piece over here. And in my mind, they were always tube supports. And so they've got nice little recesses, which were the curves of the lampstand. And I was thinking of those as places of contact. And so really with this piece over here, the neon is just resting in the tension of the leaning towers. There is nothing physically holding them in place. There's no ties, no safety net, no structure. So it's really all about that tension, and it's all about the instability of each of these towers putting enough pressure on to hold something in place. With the ceramic piece that's behind me, I think I was probably 3/4 of the way through the residency at this point, and I had a dream. I had a dream about this form sinks upside down, glazed on the outside of the sink, where you don't glaze the outside of a sink, you glaze the inside. And this was really in response to me having spent the past 2.5 months watching upside down sinks, upside down urinals, upside down toilets being moved around the factory on these wear carts. I came in one morning and I said, I've had a dream about sinks. And it looks kind of like this, and do we have anything similar? And is this something that I can work with? And within an hour, with the support of the Cola staff, I had located 2 potential sinks, and the floor manager had got them from the basement, so I was actually able to cast with the Kohler sinks that are currently in production. Initially, I didn't really know where it was going, but I knew I had to get a lot of sinks cast. And then, working with them in space, then things started to come together. The top element to the sinks, which is a doorknob, and that is actually something that also runs through with the piece at the back. And that is a direct response to the first month of the residency. Every time I tried to leave my room, the doorknob fell off in my hand. That's it. That's why. That's how the doorknob ends up being like a feature. I'm kind of really thinking about that as an initial contact to like a portal, or like moving from one space to another, whether that's a physical space or whether that's like an emotional or metaphysical space. And so that's how that kind of came and wove in to the shenanigans. Yeah, I think in the midst of all of this crashing failure of the early residency, I was just like, I wanna, all of this stuff is kind of sagging and kind of collapsing. I want to make a sphere, and I want to make that collapse, and I want to see what that does. And I spoke to the model makers, and they were like, they're like, we don't think this material will do this thing. And I was like, well, I just want to see what it does. I'm not looking for perfection. I'm not looking for perfection in any of this. I want to see how it responds to the fire and to the stresses of its own weight. And so initially I said, I want to make a yoga ball, but couldn't find one. Fortunately, because these are huge, or at least the mold was. So I got, this is like just a regular ball that you play on the beach with. And I made a mold, and then I started casting these. And I fully, after speaking to the mold makers, I fully expected them to turn into puddles in the kiln, and then they didn't. And so I was like, well, what happens if I put one on top of the other? Surely the weight of that will make it fall apart. And it didn't. And so it was really kind of my pursuit of failure, the refuse to fail, which is kind of really interesting. And so then I was like, well, what happens if I put 3 on it? And they said, well, we're actually going to have to dismantle half a kiln to make that happen. So they helped me do that right at the end of my residency. So I have one that is a triple stack. And it still kind of holds its integrity, much to the surprise of everyone, including myself. Red, blue, and green are the primary colors of light, slightly different from pigment color theory. And so I'm really interested in how together they make white light. But as soon as you obstruct one of those light sources, then you get yellow, cyan, and magenta shadows. And so I'm really interested in these forms that look on the surface one color, or kind of, they're like or an off-white. But then as soon as they start to obstruct, then things abstract. So I was really interested in that color theory and that coloration with those pieces. One of the comments that were being made while I was in the factory, while I was making these things, particularly the tower pieces, was, are you making a chess set? And I was like, no, but it looks like a chess set. So I wasn't really thinking about that within that context. I do, however, think of the black pieces in this work as pawns. The root of the chess set, really, I've been thinking about that in conjunction with this work for maybe a year. It's been like fizzing away. And it was really, I can't remember now whether it was a very short video clip or whether it was a photograph of Barack Obama shaking hands with Mitch McConnell. And it was just after Mitch McConnell had been floating really horrific, pushing through really horrific laws that really significantly impact women and girls in this country. And it looked like they were having a good time. they were laughing, and that could have just been, I don't know, it could have been anything. But for a split second, I thought, oh, this is all academic. This is just a game. It doesn't matter what side of the aisle people claim to sit. They are making rules that make decisions about everyday people's lives that will never impact theirs. And so it's like, let's see how far we can push this. Why not? And that was when I started thinking about the chess set, where the back row on both sides were the same color and the pawns on both sides were the opposing color. And really that was the kernel that set this going. And I was talking to a friend about my plan. It's like, I need to get a chess set, but I need to buy 2 chess sets. I was talking to them on the phone and I was looking on Amazon. And I went, oh, this chess set comes with 2 queens. And my friend just went, you need a chess set with 2 kings. And that was enough to kind of spin my brain off. And so with this chess set, there are no queens. There are just 2 kings. And there is also a row of knights that separate the royalty, if you like, or the ruling classes and the pawns. As part of the show, there is a 20-foot by 12-foot wall that has names and job titles of people installed in transparent vinyl. So these are the names of all the associates at the Kohler company who, in some ways, big or small, helped realize this body of work. So quite frequently, historically, there has been the myth of the artist as genius, and they're seen as someone who stands alone, to be fair, mostly white male, and who are prolific and magical and wonderful. And while those people are definitely skilled and definitely passionate about their practice, there are so many people who are involved in that, who are never given the credit, who are never recognized, who are behind the scenes, and who are invisible labor. So when I talk about invisible labor, obviously, like every manufactured or produced item on the planet has a whole bunch of invisible labor and kind of human cost associated to it. And the text wall here, these are all the people, with the exception of 2 people whose names I got after I cut the vinyl. These are all the people who have helped in either big or small ways. Like, so there is Eduardo Moreno, who would come by my studio every night and empty my bins. And so that is something that doesn't really feel like a significant act, but actually that would have taken me half an hour to get my bins, to take them outside, to come back. And that's like a break in the concentration. So every small task that you can take away from someone frees them up for this creative work. Virginia Woolf talks about In a Room of One's Own. She says that it's been argued that there can never be a female Shakespeare. And her point is, if you gave a woman a room of her own, meaning the physical and mental space that someone needs to be creative, and the fiscal and emotional and practical support, yeah, we could absolutely have a female Shakespeare. We could probably do a better job. But so yeah, kind of thinking all of these touches, these light touches, from very small acts to really big, generous acts, like Mike Fromback, who helped me dismantle a kiln to make the 3 stack pieces, but also who freed up the kiln so I could make the work that I needed to make rather than risk having it break in a different kiln. Like, all these people made it possible for me to be prolific during this residency. And then there's a whole selection of people from Alfred University, who are friends of mine and who are technicians there, who either helped me with titles or like gave me a studio visit to talk about titles, or my friend who just casually mentioned the Two King chess set, or the tech specialist who I have in the sculpture department who helped me physically cut the vinyl, because that's so hard. But all of these people have, in some small or greater way, helped put this thing together. Yeah, I think we are living in really tense times. And we are seeing the people that we have voted into power to take care of the country not actually caring about the people in the country and the longevity of the country, or even the planet at this point. We live in a time where science has proven that global warming is a thing that we need to be making drastic changes to make everybody's life better. And not only are the people in power not changing anything to offset that, but it's like they've put their foot on the accelerator so that we hit that wall faster. And so that is kind of floating around in the room. It's definitely in the chess set, and it's definitely in the raising up piece as well. However, I also think community and activism is a really magical thing. And so the neon piece with the unstable entities that come together to create something really beautiful and stable, for me, is definitely some kind of beacon of hope. Hopefully a call to recruits. That sounds really culty. I don't mean to be culty. But yeah, I mean, I think that the way that we survive this is together. It has to be together.